Welcome to the Sustainable Living Podcast. Tips, tools, and tactics for living a heart-centered life that honors Mother Earth and her inhabitants. The information shared on the Sustainable Living Podcast reflects the opinions of host Marian West, Janice Friant, and their guests. Please use your own discretion and research before applying any information to your individual situation. Now, here are your hosts, Marian and Janice.
It is a cold and rainy Sunday afternoon here in San Diego. Unusual for this time of the year, but then again, what's usual now? Weather aside, I thought today is a perfect day to begin my 3-week series I wanted to bring to you for a while. I've interviewed 3 people which had challenges in their life to overcome, very different for each of them, but I think we all can take a lesson from what they have turned said problem or said challenge in their life into. All of them are taking an active role in helping others to overcome problems of their own. And I admire that in every single one of them. Today I want to start with Darrell Smith, also known as Big D. And Darrell is so sweet. He is a podcaster himself, and he knows that audio editing is not my strong side. Not yet, or maybe never. I'm learning. You will see, or maybe you already have noticed that I'm learning. But he was so sweet and edited our interview for me. So thank you so much, Darrell. And Darrell has a podcast, the Mailman Survival Guide to the Galaxy. And I want you to listen to our interview and then hop on over and listen to Darrell's. He is amazing, and he is dealing with quite a few different issues in his life. And I just love that he's showing up and still wanting to help others to overcome their problems. Without further ado, here's our interview. Hello, everyone. This is Marianne West with the Sustainable Living Podcast. And I'm here today with a friend. I call him a friend, even though today is the first time we are meeting face to face via Skype, not in person. But we met on Twitter, and I really got intrigued by his podcast. And I will tell you more about it, or even so he will tell you more about it later. But his name is Darrell Smith, and he's a writer, he's a father, he's a husband, and a podcaster. And the podcast I'm talking about is the Mailman's Journey. No, you say it.
Yeah,
right? Because I'm messing it up.
Sorry, it's the Mailman Survival Guide to the Galaxy.
There you go. And I knew that, and I just, you know how it is when you want to say the right thing, your brain just goes. So that's me a lot. So sorry about that. So tell us about your podcast, and then I tell the world why it was so intriguing to me.
All right. The idea for that podcast, or behind it, actually started as it was kind of a need for me to just express kind of what I was going through as far as my mental health, because I've suffered from depression and anxiety for most of my life. And I also suffer from something that a lot of people don't know about. It's called sensory processing disorder. And it really started out more as an outlet for me to be able to just talk about what was going on in my life and to basically get it off of my chest.
Can I interrupt you?
Yes.
What is the disorder you say people don't know about? Because I don't know.
Okay. Sensory processing disorder. Now, there's different forms of it. In my case, it's like sensory overload. Everything seems magnified. So when I hear things, if, say, I'm in a restaurant and there's 30 people around me and they're all having conversations, I can hear all those conversations.
Oh, that must be awful.
Yeah, it's like magnified in my head. Smells. There are times when I smell things, or I perceive to smell things, and it's like it smells really bad. There are times I can't be touched because it just makes my skin crawl. It really is something that is debilitating if you don't have something to kind of counteract it. And fortunately, the medication that I take helps me. It helps kind of dull down my senses. Now, there are other forms of sensory perception disorder which are exactly the opposite, where people can't feel pain, or maybe they can't move their legs, or they're not able to walk normally just because the sensation for the nerves isn't there. So it's like I said, there's not a lot known about it. It's only something that recently, probably, and I say recently, probably in the last 15 or 20 years, there's really been a lot of research done on it. And, it's something that is passed down. So like my mother has a form of it where her hearing was incredibly acute. And, I just kind of got the, a bigger majority of it.
Wow. Thank you so much for explaining that. And that, I think, puts a little bit more into perspective too. You were saying that you're suffering or have suffered from depression and anxiety, and I'm sure that's part of it. I mean, if you are so overstimulated all the time and hear everything so acutely and so forth, that must make it very, very hard. So thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
So I interrupted you. You were telling us about your podcast.
Eventually it evolved when people started to listen to it, which I never went into it with the idea that anyone would probably ever listen, if that makes sense. I kind of put it out there to the world and thought, well, if somebody listens, great. If they don't, great. That I'm not worried about it because it's helping me. But then something changed. People started to listen, and then they started to contact me. And it really became a thing where people were telling me, hey, I'm really glad that you're sharing this, because I've felt like this for a long time. And I thought that I was the only person that felt like this. And so then it kind of evolved into, okay, I felt like maybe I was being selfish by just discussing my own issues, and started looking more into tips and things that people could do to help them with their depression. And it became a learning journey for me. I've always been the type that I believed in self-teaching. If you want to know about something, do the research. Don't let don't let somebody else tell you what it is or what it isn't. Research it for yourself. And that was something else I always told people, look, I can sit here and tell you what I think, but do the research. And the biggest thing too was that I wanted to get the message out to seek treatment. If you're in a situation where you suffer from these mental disorders, there's treatment out there. Don't be stubborn and think that, well, I'll just get through it by myself.
Yeah, thank you for that. And really, that's one of the big reasons that people might say, well, what does it have to do with sustainable living, right?
Yeah.
And to me, I feel it has everything to do with it. So there are so many things you just said. One of them is research and figure out for yourself. And I think that's one thing we are all about in this community, about everything, question what people tell you you can or you cannot do. And don't just believe authority, so to speak. But really, when I listened to your podcast first, I was so struck with, this is a topic so many people experience in their own life, in their family, and it's a topic not many people talk about.
Yeah.
There is still so much blaming and shaming in the whole mental health field. And I just really loved that you had that courage to come out and bring it out to the world, and to really encourage people to say, look, you're not alone.
Yeah.
And I, my family, we have depression issues in my family for sure. And I personally go sometimes to places where you don't feel so great. And when you're in that space, it's really hard to reach out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things I tried to stay away from was kind of statistics. But when you really look at the statistics, it's actually mind-boggling, because 1 in 5 people in the world suffer from some form of mental illness. That's a staggering number. There's 7 billion people on this planet, and 1 in 5 suffer from some form of mental illness. And of those, 2/3 will never seek treatment or help. We're talking about a range of about 1.2 billion people. That's
a huge
staggering.
amount of people. Yeah.
And when you have that many people who suffer from some form of mental illness, and they're suffering in silence, and a lot of them think that because they've been kind of shamed, that it's a taboo subject. You don't talk about it. You don't say anything. Oh, if you're feeling like this, you're just feeling sorry for yourself. Get over it. And those people don't have anywhere to turn, or they feel like they don't have anywhere to turn. And that really bothered me.
Well, I'm glad you acted upon it, because, I mean, you said some key words here about said people feel like they have to toughen up and show us a strong side. And, I think that maybe, we can talk even a little bit about the male-female difference, because for men, it was like suffer in silence.
Yeah.
And women would just be looked upon as, oh, they're just women, they're crazy,
Yeah.
Kind of that, women had the privilege to express their feelings, but they had to pay for that privilege by not being taken serious in the rest of life.
Yeah.
A little bit like that, So would you share a few of the tips you found along your own journey? And I want to also say, like, your title of your podcast, The Mailman's Guide to Survival, right?
Yeah,
Galaxy.
Mailman's Survival Guide to the Galaxy.
I listen to every single episode, and I'm so bad with names. So
It's fine.
forgive me. I should have put like a big post-it note. I thought for sure I had it down, But I have you to say the right name. So there we go, So you actually were a mailman for many, many years. So
Yeah.
you probably saw a lot of people and had insight into a lot of people's lives on some way or another too. I mean, I don't know if you want to go there, but I find that interesting too. But I wanted to talk a little bit about community and tips, and the reason I brought up the whole Mailman thing, and you have to correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel if you go to somebody's house every day, even you have not huge interactions,
Yeah.
you might be the only person they see in a day. Did you find stuff like that happening?
Yeah, there were instances where that occurred, and mostly it was older people.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things is if someone has a disability, or they're not able to go to their mailbox, they'll have their mailbox up near their door. And so a lot of times when I would go and deliver for those people, I might be the only person that they see that day. And, I would always try to talk to them if I saw them, and, just hi, how are you doing? And, you don't have a lot of time to spend because you're so busy and you're under the gun all the time with that job. You have a time limit, and there's a lot to do in that time limit. And I mean, I don't want to get into the logistics of it. A lot of people have misconceptions about what their mail deliverers do and what their job is. And if they knew the reality, they would kind of understand why there's a lot of mental health issues among people who are working in the at the post office.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, it's important to be able to do it. I had one lady in particular, and I'll never forget, she was probably 90 years old, and God bless her, she wouldn't get a mailbox up at her door. And so what I would do is, if there had been a couple of days where she hadn't come out to get her mail, I would just get out, take it up to her, knock on her door, and, hey, how are you doing? Were you not able to get out? Or, and just kind of let her know that, hey, somebody's checking on her.
That's
And
so nice.
you were talking about building community. I think it's important for people to know that they have friends or family or some kind of support group around them. And that's where I think it's the most important, to have that foundation, to be able to know that, hey, if I'm suffering, I have someone to talk to, someone I can lean on, and know that they're not going to judge you or belittle you. And I always try to kind of approach the people that did have problems and I did see on a regular basis, I always tried to approach them in that way, because I know, especially with everything that's occurred with me in the last year, a kind word can go a long way. And that's just the truth.
I so agree with you. I used to have a little grocery store, and I know some people just came in every day to buy like a tiny little thing just so they would have an interaction and a smile and a hello,
Yeah.
that I feel that's definitely something we need to bring back into our society. And even when you talk about the mental health issue, like, or health issue, period,
Yeah.
you as a mailman had insights into people's life. And if there was an emergency, you could have intervened. You could have
Yeah.
called an ambulance or just even asked for a wellness check and so forth. And, I had a similar function in that store. And this is we are missing a lot, I feel, in our society now. But you said especially what you went through the last year. Do you want to elaborate on it?
2016.
You don't have to.
No, it's fine, because I mean, I chronicled it on my podcast. Last year was probably the most difficult year of my life. I had multiple deaths in the family, which were, devastating. My mom had breast cancer and went through that. And then I became unable to work because of losing my vision. And that was a situation where I had been blind in my right eye for several years. And it started to happen in my left eye. And then when I went to the doctor, he said, you can't drive anymore. And that really was devastating to me, because that just took away, my form of supporting my family. And I really spiraled into a state of depression that was, it was bad. I was in some bad places, and my eyesight just continued to degrade to where now, in my good eye, we'll say it, in my good eye, I'm legally blind with it being corrected. So it's not like I've had an opportunity to be able to try to go back to work. And that's been tough on my family, tough on me personally. I've worked all my life. I started working construction with my father when I was 12 years old.
Wow.
So, for 30 years of my life, I've worked. And to take that away, or to have it taken away, was a real hit to the pride. And, it was something that the cast helped me get through as well. Now, don't get me wrong. I still, every day I think about it. Every day I feel guilty about it.
Feel guilty about not being able to work?
Yes.
So it's not your fault.
Yeah.
Right?
It's because, you still have people who are depending on you, and you feel like you're letting them down. So, sorry.
No, that's okay. And I think that's, you're pointing out some, which when you acquire a disability anywhere, anytime in your life, I think those are feelings which are coming up of, like you're feeling guilty about it, even so obvious it's nothing you did, right?
Yeah.
And that's part of, having to cope with this kind of situation, which makes it so difficult, because those are feelings which, they have no reason in logic. So they are hard to combat with logic, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things I've learned, when you're dealing with curveballs that life throws you, sometimes you got to know when you're not in control. And that's probably the hardest thing, because you want to feel like you can control the situation, or that you're able to fix the situation, especially as a man. A man has the desire to fix problems. That may sound stereotypical, but it's just true. If you grew up in a traditional household, and I did, the man, you're just expected to be able to fix things. And when it's something that you can't fix and it's out of your control, it's hard. But the things I've learned, or one of the things I've learned, is it's okay to cry and feel sorry for yourself, but you can only do that for a small amount of time. Eventually, you got to pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and say, okay, this isn't going to stop me. There's something else that I can do to feel like I'm being productive. And, for me, it's being able to write, and, there's programs that you can use to write with. Even if, you're blind, you can, you got speech to text and things out there that can help you. Another thing was doing the podcast. Like I said, it was, I do, or I was at one time, I was doing 3 podcasts, and that was, it just kept me busy.
I didn't know you were doing 3. So let's talk about, you have a podcast with your brother,
Yeah.
which is completely different.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
It's humor, and sometimes humor not in good taste. Let's put it that way.
I'll be honest about that. Yeah.
But, it's still, and you tell people, we are making fun of everybody. So if you happen to be the one right now, don't be offended. It's just, part of.
Yeah, we make fun of each other. We make fun of ourselves. We make fun of everything. And it's not with maliciousness. That's not the intent behind it. The intent is to kind of show people, the world is silly. I mean, it's really, there's a lot of silliness that goes on in the world. And sometimes we take ourselves a little too seriously.
Absolutely. I so agree with you.
Laughing, it's an old cliche. Laughter is the best medicine. But it really is. If you can laugh, even about your own situation. And that was, I'll tell a story. Right after it first occurred, that the doctor said, hey, you're done. You're done. And I mean, it was tough for me. One of the things that helped to get me through was my friends and my brother and my family all started suggesting jobs that I could do now that I was blind. And they were the most ridiculous, they were things like you can play the piano now automatically because you're blind, or you can become a sharpshooter, drive a bus. I mean, it was all just nonsense stuff, but it really helped me feel better because I could laugh about it.
Absolutely.
And really, more than anything, that's the whole purpose of the show, is for me and my brother, to spend time together. He's been one of my best friends my whole life. And the other reason is just to be able to laugh, because for that hour and a half or whatever it is that we're recording, we're laughing nonstop. I mean, it's just laughter. And man, people forget about that. I think when you get down and you're feeling bad and you think, I don't want to laugh. But if you can find humor in something and you're able to laugh, it starts to pick your mood up.
For sure. I mean, you're talking to somebody who is a laughter yoga teacher. So, that's part of what I do. And in laughter yoga, we don't even rely on a sense of humor. It's just about laughing for no reason.
Yeah.
And, there have been so many studies made. That's actually one tip on helping with anxiety and with depression and all of those things is laughter.
Yeah, absolutely.
And even if you are in a space where you can't find anything funny, to, make it a point and do a laughter exercise, because it helps to raise those feeling good hormones and stuff. So, so that's fantastic. And would you say it's the name of the podcast? So I'm not going to mess it up again for you.
That one is called the Bro-Rons podcast. So it's a mixture of brothers and morons. Because, we're, like I said, we're making fun of ourselves as well. It's been, I mean, it's really taken off here the last.
Yeah, it is fun. So one of my favorite sections is when you take like a story you find in the news, and then, because sometimes you don't even have to, just reading it is enough to make you go, really? This happened? That's too funny. So yeah, for sure. So definitely check out that podcast. And then what is the third one you were doing?
Well, the third one, it was actually the first podcast I ever did, and it was with my 2 nephews. It's no longer in existence. What we did was we reviewed comic books and video games, and they were more on that end, but we talked about movies and comic books. And I'm trying to be a comic book writer. That's one of the things that I do.
So
And I
very
actually
cool.
I actually have a comic that's coming out.
Tell us about that. So it's coming out. Are you self-publishing? Are you?
Yeah, we self-published. We kickstarted it last year. It was fully funded, and I'm hoping that it will be out by the end of March. And
That's soon.
yeah, it's me and Pete Davies, who's the illustrator, and he's great. I mean, the guy he's crazy talented, as well as everybody else that it's working on it. Sada Zim is doing the color work, and he's blowing it out of the water. And then I have a guy named Robin Jones who's doing the lettering work. And I mean, I just couldn't work with a greater bunch of guys. I mean, they are good at what they do, and they're ending up making me look good, because they're good at what they do.
I'm sure you look good without them too. So this podcast is probably coming out when your comic is out already. So how can people get a hold of that?
I'm putting it out under my own self-publishing, and it's called Blind Eye Comic. And you can find that at blindeye.weebly.com. And that's where you'll find the comic. That's where I have it listed. And then later on this year, I'll have another one actually, probably kickstartering sometime in probably August or so. So yeah,
what is the best way for people? I mean, I'm going to link to that in the show notes to the website to find your comic. But are you going to announce there your new Kickstarter, or are you having another online presence where people can find out about those things?
That's where I'll be announcing it. I'll be announcing it there. I have a Facebook page for the comic that I'm bringing out now. It's called The Axeman Cometh. And then, Twitter presence, and it'll be on the website when the new one hits too, or whenever we kickstart it, because there's a lot involved in going through and getting the support for it. And fortunately, indie comic creators are a wonderful community. They really support one another, and it's funny, you make connections. And that's actually how I got connected with the indie community, was through Games and Graphics. We started interviewing a lot of the indie comic creators, and then, I just got to know a lot of them, and especially a lot of them over in England.
Mm-hmm.
And, but the community it's not a huge community. So you get to know a lot of the other indie creators, but like I said, they're all very supportive of one another. It's just like you with your, sustainable living. If you got a community of those people that you just discuss matters with and talk to, I'm going to assume they're all pretty supportive and are willing to give tips for how to do something better, or ways they've done things and found that it's easier. Because that was something that was huge when I was doing this, was that people were willing to say, if I asked them a question, hey, what about this? Or I'm trying this. Is there a better way to do this? They were more than willing to say, yeah, hey, think about this when you're doing this, or try this and see if that helps. And that makes a world of difference.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And again, you said like a whole bunch of, or gave us a bunch of points I want to circle back to.
Okay.
And bring it back to the mental health part. Because now, did you start that comic before you started going blind, or is it a project you started after?
It's weird. The idea originally started in probably 2000. I've always been kind of a frustrated writer. And so I started to write a book. But like a lot of things, depression has a way of telling you, or convincing you, that what you're doing isn't very good, or it's not good enough. And so one of the issues that I had throughout my lifetime was I would start on something and then I would think, well, this is complete rubbish, throw it away, and it's done, And fortunately, I got started writing again. A guy asked me to write an article for an independent magazine, and I hadn't written in years. And I wrote that article, and it got a lot of good feedback. And then I actually ended up writing 2 more articles for that for that magazine later on. And one of them was actually about mental health, and just a lot of positive feedback. And that really helped. It helped boost my confidence to say, okay, I have this story that I've been wanting to tell for a long time. And I like comics. I like the ability to tell some of the story through actual pictures as opposed to necessarily needing dialogue. And so I started working on the script before I went blind.
Mm-hmm.
And then after, when I started to lose my vision slowly, I was able to complete the script probably about 3 or 4 months before I got to the point where I am now.
Mm-hmm.
So that was helpful. And then I started writing the other script too. And I actually wrote a script, it's weird, in about 4 days' time for the other comic. That's one of the things I want to talk about with depression. I want to loop it back around here, or mental health in general. Part of the thing that will help you, and this is just from my own experience, is refocusing your mind and trying to be creative. If you can refocus and use some of that feeling things that you're feeling to create something, even if it's just for yourself, you don't have to put it out there to the world. Just create. It will do you a world of good. It's crazy because it's like you're channeling all of those thoughts, all of those emotions into what you're creating. And even if someone else looks at it and says, well, I don't like it, it doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is that while you're creating, you feel better because it gets your mind off of the situation.
Absolutely. That's a really good tip. And I think that's people can apply in so many different ways, because creating could be writing, it could be drawing, it could be, making a sculpture out of trash. It could be
anything.
Gardening. It could be anything, right? Yeah. So that's a wonderful tip. I just wanted to comment on a couple of things. So one was the one you said depression has that way of telling you that you're not good enough, and said whatever you do is not good enough.
Yeah.
And I think that's actually and a lot of people don't think it is, but even published authors, which have written, many, many books, say they have that imposter syndrome still sometimes.
Yeah.
Just feeling that the work is not good enough. And I love that you said to just do not listen to that voice. Listen to the voice which says, who cares? I'm doing this for me. And if others like it later on, like with your podcast, when you created it for you, and then so many people found value in it. And that's probably some which happens a lot, that we do some. I almost believe that if you do some just to make money or just to get famous, it probably doesn't work.
Yeah.
Because your heart and your soul is not in it. But if you create it for yourself, and then by concentrating on that particular project, your mind can calm down and letting go of, the feelings of not being enough or anxiety or whatever it is.
Yeah, absolutely.
And the other point I really got from you is that you do have a strong family support, which is wonderful. And I was going to ask you, well, what do you do if you don't have a family? Because not everybody has a supportive family. But you already answered it. You have created community around an interest. So your indie comic community is probably people you don't exclusively end up talking comics after a while.
No,
it becomes like a support group, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that actually occurred, because the guy that's the illustrator, I actually met him or started talking to him because of the podcast. I can't remember. He messaged me one day and he said, hey, I really like this cast. And there had been something in the cast that I had said that my dad always told us, which was a day above ground is better than a day below ground any day.
I love that. Yeah, for sure.
And I had quoted that on the cast, and he had written it on his chalkboard that he had at his house, and he took a picture of it. And it really struck me. I mean, it really hit a heartstring for me. And I thought, man, you don't realize that you have the kind of impact on people sometimes that you have. And that's something else that I think people need to think about, or that will help you with a situation. Try to help other people. If you try to help other people and you put yourself out there, again, it gets your mind off of your own problems, and it feels good to help other people, because your situation may not be exactly the same as theirs, but they may be able to derive something from what you've gone through in order to help themselves. And I think that's big. We don't live in a bubble, you know? It'd be nice to think that we do. Sometimes, sometimes I think to myself, boy, I'd like to live in a bubble, you know, where I'm just isolated, but you don't. And I think the fact that you don't, or if you put yourself out there so you don't live in a bubble, I think you'll find that there's maybe a lot more joy in the world than you thought there was. And that maybe you can get joy from things that you never even thought of. And that the way you act and the way you present yourself can really have an impact on other people in the world.
Definitely. So you reached out to your podcast, but so let's just brainstorm some other way people could. So you could volunteer in different situations, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Maybe just even go to a public space and smile at somebody, right?
Yeah, I mean, and where I live right next to a military facility. And, you know, years ago, my mom worked for a Veterans Administration, and I would go periodically and volunteer there. And you'd be amazed at the number of people who just enjoy seeing someone and talking to someone. And, you know, you just sit and listen. And a lot of times that's important, is that you can just sit and listen. You don't necessarily have to be the one doing the talking, because a lot of people have a story to tell, and all they want is somebody to listen to them. And so, yeah, like I said, at the end of the day, they feel better, you feel better, you know, just you can volunteer your time anywhere. I mean, you know, find what your gift is and use that gift.
Yeah, and listening is a huge gift, because I feel we live in a space where, and you know, you and I included, we're podcasters, we talk a lot.
Yeah.
You know, so, but people like to talk a lot, not necessarily listen that much, and just listening is a gift, and thank you for saying that. Yeah, it just feels like building community is so important for everything we do.
Yeah.
And you know, be it our environmental health, our mental health. And I feel all of those things come together. And that was like one of the big reasons I wanted to bring you on, because a lot of time we compartmentalize everything so much. You know, it's like, okay, here are the garden people, and here are those people, and here are those people. But in reality, everything interacts. And if we don't take care of any part of our society or our life, we all suffer.
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
You know, yeah. Do you have any other tips? Like, let's say you are not a podcaster, you are feeling too sad to even think about any creative endeavor you could do. Would it be helpful to seek out like a support group? I mean, we know about support groups for alcoholism and drug addiction, which probably a lot of people deal with mental health issues, who deal with substance abuse issues. You know, like one comes before the other type of a thing.
Yeah.
Would you suggest to, for example, join one of those groups, even if you don't have a substance abuse issue, or are there support groups for somebody suffering?
Yeah, absolutely. There are support groups, and you can usually, if you're going to seek treatment and you're going to a facility, a psychological facility, a lot of times they have information on support groups that you can join. And a lot of times they'll have flyers sitting out, or, you know, whatever, and you can find those groups. One of the things I always pushed at the end of the podcast, as you know, was that if you're ever in a situation where you feel like there's no hope and things are that bad, don't give up, and don't make that mistake. There are people with the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline that will help you. They're there 24/7. You can call in, and I'll give the number. It's 1-800-273-8255. And that ends up coming out to 1-800-SUICIDE. And those people do incredible, incredible work. Don't ever feel like you're by yourself or the situation is so dire that there's no hope, because that simply isn't the truth. There's always hope. Hope is tomorrow. And if you wind up with no tomorrows, then that's when all hope is gone.
So don't give up.
Don't give up. That's, I would always end the show, and I'll talk about the cast, that the cast has been pulled down for some reasons that are behind the scenes that we both know. And I'm going to be bringing out a new cast. I don't know if I'm still going to bring it out under the same name, or if I'm going to change the name and bring the cast back out. But at the end of every cast, I always said, always keep pushing forward. And that's one of the things that I have to remind myself of a lot of times on a daily basis. You can't stop. Just because life kicks you in the teeth, and when you're down, sometimes life will just keep on kicking you when you're down. But there's hope. There's always hope. Hope springs eternal. Tomorrow may be better than today. If it's not, it might be the next day. But eventually it will turn around. Please don't give up.
Yeah, thank you for that. And it's so true. So far as we know, there's always going to be a tomorrow. And if there's none, then we're all gone. But until that time, there is hope, right?
Yeah, there's hope. I guess, if I had one message to really give people, it would be to not give up. Just don't let the world or your mental health break you.
Yeah, and I think you already said it very beautifully too. Like, don't be by yourself. Reach out. If you don't have a family, there are phone numbers which are free to call. I think still not everybody necessarily has access to medical care. I believe there is still a problem there, but I believe that many churches and other facilities do have spaces to go to. Be it a shelter or programs. So life feels really overwhelming. There is help.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And sometimes it might just be to say, okay, today I'm going to sleep now and wait for tomorrow, and tomorrow is a better day.
Yeah. And you know what? That's okay if you have to do that. If that's the way you have to get through until tomorrow, but just think to yourself, tomorrow, if I just get through today, tomorrow I'm going to do something. And if the next day you wake up and you still can't do something, just don't give that hope up. At that point, start to look for people, and this is something I've always said too. And I put this out on my cast multiple times. I'll talk to you. I'm not a professional. I am in no way, shape, or form a mental health professional. I'm just a guy who's lived with it his whole life, taught himself as much as he could teach himself about the subject, and does the best he can to get through life. But I'm a good listener. I always told people, if you need to reach out to me, if you don't feel like you can reach out to anybody else, you could email me. If you have my my number, you could text me. I'll talk to anyone, and I have over the last 2 years' time. I've talked to a lot of people, and I don't give them. I try not to give them advice. As far as professional advice, first bit of advice is go get treatment. Go find a mental health professional, because Lord knows I see one. But I'll listen. I'll listen, and I'll try to do the things that I need to do to comfort you and say, hey, tomorrow's going to be better. Or I understand. Sometimes people just need to hear that someone understands what they're going through.
Right. And I think this is like a good, maybe we can kind of bring it together, because so 1 out of 5 deals with mental health issues, but there are 4 people which are not, but which need to understand what that other person is going through. So, and that's part of the reason too we're doing this podcast, just for information. So if you're in the situation that you're dealing with a problem, reach out. But if somebody reaches out to you, just stop for a minute and listen, right?
Yeah.
And from, what I know about depression, sometimes when you're in that state of being depressed, it's very difficult maybe to even find that phone number. So if you're around somebody, just give them a resource list, but without said, and you correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel sometimes there's an up-down relationship for people, so if you're dealing with somebody, or if you have somebody in your family, in your surrounding who has mental problems, try to be helpful without being judgmental. Does that make sense?
That's the perfect way to put it. Part of the problem where people don't seek help is the stigma involved. There's so much stigma involved with mental health issues, whether it be, that you need to suck it up and do what you need to do, or that because you have mental health issues, you're dangerous, or, whatever the case may be. There's so many stigmas, and it's been stigmatized for so long. I mean, how many times, when I was a kid, if somebody said the word psychiatrist, the first thing that came to mind was, oh, you're going to a head shrinker.
Right.
Or, they're being put in some kind of facility, or, whatever it was. And it's simply not the case, it's just simply not the case. And I'll go back to the depression, because a lot of people will get the blues sometimes, and they'll say, oh, well, I'm feeling down. And those people, a lot of times, because they'll only feel down for a day or two, and then they're right back at it. And that's not their normal cycle. The idea they have is that, oh, well, why can't you be the same way? But that's just not how it works with someone that actually suffers from a severe depression. Every day for me is a battle. I battle with it every day. And even on days that I feel good, it can be one thing or one word or something that sets me into a spiral. In order to help someone like that, you cannot judge, because you don't know. You don't know what's going to set them into a spiral. You don't know what's going on in their life. Even if you think you don't know what's going on in their head. You just don't. Offer the help and don't be judgmental about it. That person needs the help.
Right. Now, personally, since you know that can happen to you, that's their trigger words and so forth, have you found a way to stop that spiral, or is that, difficult to do or impossible to do?
It's not impossible. It's very difficult sometimes. And sometimes it doesn't work. The biggest thing that I've found for me, is a couple of things. Go outside, get some sunshine and fresh air. It helps. It seems, like I said, again, a lot of these things seem cliche, but they work. And if they work, they work. That's just the way it is. Some people go out and exercise, and that helps them tremendously. For me, the thing that helps me the most, other than going outside, is creating, because it really just shifts the focus off of what I'm thinking. And as silly as this sounds, I wrote a letter to my depression one time.
That doesn't sound silly. That sounds brilliant.
And it was on the Facebook page for the Mailman Survival Guide. I posted it for a while, and it was crazy to me, the response that I got from it. It really hit a note with a lot of people. And while it was a letter to say, this is what you do to me, this is how I feel, and I'm tired of it. I don't want you to be allowed to overtake my life anymore. And some of it is that mentality, is having the mentality that, yeah, this is going to bring me down, but I'm going to fight tooth and nail against it. I'm going to do whatever I have to do to just keep it from controlling my life. And it's tough. Like I said, every day is a struggle, every day. And anyone that's going through it, I have all the respect in the world for you. If you're, like I said, waking up every day and moving forward, because I know how tough your battle is.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you so much for sharing so deeply of your experience. I mean, that's really what I was so admiring about you is that you're putting this out. And I'm really hoping that your podcast is up again soon.
Yeah.
So I can direct people to it and people can listen because, like you said, it's so many people which are affected by it.
Yeah.
And I think we all need to know about it, if you're affected by it or not, because I'm sure if somebody is depressed and somebody else comes and says, "I'll just get over it," it's not helpful.
No.
and and that's important to know because there are so many people which, So do you feel like you're getting sometimes advice which you rather would not, that people feel free to say those things like get over it or
Yeah.
just take more vitamin D and everything will be good? Or,
I wish it was that simple. A lot of those things used to bother me. The reason why I think they don't bother me as much anymore is because I know a lot of people are saying it not out of maybe maliciousness, but because they care, but they don't know how to help. And now one of the things I will say, and this is just being straight up honest. Sometimes the best thing or one of the things that helps me the most is if my wife gives me a good verbal butt kicking. Now that's just the truth. Sometimes she'll tell me, "Look, you're not leaving me here by myself to do this on my own. No, it's not fair to me, and it's not fair to me." And that kind of snaps me out of that place that I'm at. She always tells me, "Look, I know we've gone through a lot, and we've gone through a lot, especially in this last year, but I couldn't go through it without you." And that really, like I said, it snaps me out of it. It's not judgmental, but it's just letting you know, hey, refocus where we're at, because you got a family, you got children, you got this, and this. So it's time to refocus. And I think every once in a while we need that. This morning, when I said to my wife, "Hey, I'm going to be on this podcast to talk about mental health," the first question that came out of her mouth was, "Why aren't you doing your podcast yet? Why aren't you back to doing it?
Why aren't you doing your podcast yet?"
And it's, and I kind of hem and haw and said, "Well, after that whole situation, I wanted to take a break for a while and blah, blah, blah." And she called me out on it. She called me out. So, it wasn't necessarily what I wanted to hear, but it's what I needed to hear.
Well, good. So when we are off this call, you're going to work on yours and bring it back out. Good job. I'm glad you did that. Great. So is there something we haven't touched on you would like to share with the world?
I think, like I said, to never lose hope. We've touched on that, but I always, like I said, I like to end it with that. Don't lose hope. Don't give up. Keep pushing forward. That's the only advice that I can really give. And like I said, the only way there's not hope is if there isn't a tomorrow. And even if you think you're alone and no one cares, that's not the truth. That's your mental illness telling you that. It simply isn't the truth. There's help out there. There's people who care. And there's people who have been where you're at and are willing to help you get through what you're going through.
Thank you for that. Thank you so much for coming on, Darrell. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.